So hey guys, it looks like the hits are already here, and just a reminder, uh, you should dismantle these cards if you're looking to get some of your CP refunded or whatever. So I'll just do that real quick. But today we're going to be talking about the virus cards in general. So real quick though, let's see. I get a refund on my jet as well. And then branded fusion, I guess, as well. What? Where's my branded fusion? Am I blind? Oh, there it is. Okay, it's just the blindness kicking in here. Anyway, so the thing about the virus cards is that they're entirely unique in how they work, and how they work is still somewhat jank, honestly. Anyway, crush cards is just a rare. Well, I mean, this is kind of like giving your opponent three foolish burials, which is not the best, but yeah. The virus cards usually have a condition of tributing a dark monster with a certain stat line. So for like full force, 2000 or more defense, and then look at your opponent's hand, all monsters they control and all cards they draw until the end of their third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all those monsters with 1500 or less defense. And then we have, let's see, crush cards tribute a dark monster with 1000 or less attack. Eradicator Epidemic Virus. This is tribute one dark monster with 2500 or more attack. And then we have Grinning Grave Virus. Tribute one dark monster with 3000 or less attack. So we already know we're getting the Labyrinth Secret Pack, so that can be assumed to the reason why Eradicator Epidemic Virus is down to one copy. Although, honestly, I don't think this card is that insane. It's just, like, really annoying going second, I suppose. Because of Labyrinth, I guess. Technically, with one copy, because, if they put it at 2, you can still, trap trick it. So it's like, that's probably why it's at 1. So that kind of sucks. Not much you can do about it. Let's see, there's also Grinning Grave Virus. And this one is just legit Foolish Burial, right? Isn't it? No, wait, let's see. In their hand, or destroys one card of their choice in their hand or deck for every 500 attack the monster had on the field. Tribute one dark monster with 3000 or less attack, yeah. And then if you tribute a monster with 2000 or more attack to activate this card, look at all cards your opponent draws until the end of their third turn. After this card's activation, destroy all monsters among them. Cards destroyed and sent to the graveyard by this card's effect cannot activate their own effects that same turn. So Grinning Grave, it just is legit Foolish Burial, I guess. Crush cards is like Foolish Burial, but the monsters in question have to have 1500 or more attack, which is like a little bit better, like not by that much, honestly. Like, real quick, let's look at tier limits. So they can also pop the same card. It doesn't say anything about different cards. Sharon's at 1800, for example. Rayleigh is only at 800. Rhino is at 1500. And Havness, where is Havness? 1600. So your opponent could just, for example, if you activate this on them, pop Rhino, pop Sharon, pop Havness. Yeah, that doesn't look like something you necessarily want to do, but I guess technically it's something you can do. But I don't know exactly what targets your opponent would have, but like they probably have some targets. Most decks do have some kind of monster they want in the graveyard for whatever reason, like Enchantress, for example. or like even putting in like Sprite Red would not be that bad if you were strictly using the Grinning Grave effect on yourself. The small downside of cannot activate their own effects that same turn isn't that great, honestly. It's just pretty iffy. But in general, most of the virus cards here, they have the cost of tributing a dark monster, and then it activates some sort of effect, like that involves destroying like cards either in deck or in hand. But like the ones that you would actually play are mostly going to be the ones that destroy cards in hand. So these are particularly devastating when your opponent, like, you do want to like somewhat foolish burial some cards a lot of the time, you know? Decks usually have those targets, right? But you're not doing too well if your entire hand, like every single monster you have, is in the graveyard. Unless you're tier limits, I suppose, but like, just in general. So if we, like, for example, activate, I believe, let's see. I think sprites have more defense than they do attack. So if we activate, like, deck devastation virus against sprite, let's see, 1,400, 1,200, 1,000, 1,300, 1,100. And that's in the extra deck, so it doesn't really count. So every single sprite, if your opponent had sprites in hand, would go instantly into the graveyard. So the only hope they have is having, like, maybe like a sprite starter or something. Or like, I believe, Nimble Angler. I guess. I don't know why, but Nimble Angler, if it is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can special summon up to 2 level 3 or lower Nimble monsters. I have no idea what these Nimble monsters are, honestly. Like, why do these monsters exist, and why are they, like, somewhat generic? Kind of irritating. Well, I won't get too much into it today, I guess, but I guess that's a topic for another day. Kind of like just why Sprite is pissing me off recently, I guess. But anyways, virus cards. Usually, I think the best field spell, of course, to play in conjunction with the virus cards is, of course, going to be Lair of Darkness. Lair of Darkness has this great effect that synergizes well with the virus cards. Of course, you don't need to play Lair. You just need to meet the condition and have the virus card either like in your hand or on the field, and this would work perfectly perfectly fine as well. So Eradicator Epidemic Virus in particular, though, is pretty nasty, though, because going second into Eradicator Epidemic Virus, your opponent can basically more or less, well, it's actually more, not less. They can remove most of your ways to out, like, their board, I guess. In the case of Labyrinth, they'll mostly have back row, and with Eradicator Epidemic Virus, they can pop all your spells, meaning like if you had a Harpy's Feather Duster to dust through their board, Lightning Storm, whatever, those kinds of cards, they can destroy all of them, effectively sending them to the graveyard, not allowing you to activate either Lightning Storm or Harpy's Feather Duster. Which is, yeah, pretty strong to an extent. I mean, declaring traps can technically also remove evenly matched, and this actually also destroys spell traps you control as well, not just the ones in the hand. And I kind of forgot to mention this, but every single like virus card has this effect here that says end all cards they draw until the end of their third turn after this card's activation. So basically for 3 turns, like 3 draws. If you drew any declared, like for example, if you declare spell on this, then any spell you draw will be destroyed, which is pretty strong-ish, but like not really. It kind of depends exactly on how your opponent's playing the deck. So one of the downsides of the virus cards, I suppose, is that if your opponent searches a card, then well, it's not destroyed. It's only if it's drawn, which is a little bit weird. So if you drew off of like Pot of Extravagance, for example, and any of those cards meet the condition of the virus card that's been activated, then it will be destroyed. But if you instead searched it with, like, for example, let's say you use Tri-Brigade effects, you can just add like a Tri to your hand and be completely fine. Like a Tri-Brigade monster of some sort, like, I don't know, you could add Fractal, you can add Kit, Nerval, whichever one. So, a bit brutal in that kind of way as well. The only thing that's really annoying about the virus cards, honestly, is if your opponent goes first, because it's well, not as easy to resolve virus cards after your opponent has a board set up. So it's pretty good, like, going first. So let's go ahead and put these here real quick. So depending on a list, of course, right? The virus cards can be pretty brutal to deal with. There are decks that completely can't deal with, like, certain virus cards. Like, if, for example, I know I'm against Runic, and I go ahead and do Eradicator Epidemic Virus Declare Spell, this will basically rip out of my opponent's hand pretty much everything. Their life savings, really. So with Runic, for example, they can technically chain like as many Runic cards as they can, but they won't have. They will likely not have a discard for Hugin to add Runic Fountain. But Runic Fountain actually draws cards, so that will pop every single card they draw if it is a spell, for example. So that's kind of weird, I guess. But like with Lair specifically, Lair is pretty interesting in that all monsters become dark, and once per turn, if you attribute a monster you control to activate a card effect, you contribute one dark monster your opponent controls even though you do not control it. So with Lair of Darkness effect, you can basically send your opponent's card as cost, which is very strong. It, like, let's put these in real quick. So this is equivalent to like an Underworld Goddess almost. It's pretty close. The only difference between like Underworld Goddess and like Lair of Darkness, I think that would be like pretty important to mention, is that Underworld Goddess is purely like uses your opponent's card as cost, in the sense that even unaffected monsters can be Underworld Goddess. But Lair of Darkness, first off, you can only like well, even if we have Lair of Darkness on the field first, and then your opponent summons like Ultimate Falcon, for example, well, it doesn't really matter what the order is, but even with Lair of Darkness, you won't be able to tribute Ultimate Falcon, because this is technically the effect of this card, Lair of Darkness, which that monster is not affected by, whereas Underworld Goddess is strictly cost, kind of, like as part of a summoning condition, in the same way like a this is like a kaiju, basically, in the extra deck, I guess, is one way to put it. Lair of Darkness, however, this is kind of like an effect, like super poly. In case you didn't know, you cannot super poly unaffected monsters. Like, I believe Psychic and Punisher would not be possible to super poly, I believe, if it has the activated effects protection available. Because super poly is basically the effect to use one of your opponent's monsters as a material is basically what that is, and that's not doable. Like, with Super Poly, I believe that's how that would work, at least. But with Lair of Darkness, I guess you could still tribute Psychic and Punisher, because this is not an activated effect, I believe. This is a continuous, and then that's a cost. So, it gets a little complicated, I guess. But, either way, this is, like, not respondable when you tribute your opponent's monster, which is fairly strong. So, for example, if my opponent controls Baron de Flor, and I have Eradicator Epidemic Virus, immediately on the special summon of Baron de Flor, I can tribute Baron de Flor, and then Baron cannot respond because it is already in the graveyard. So, this kind of removal, pretty nasty. But of course, this is a trap deck first off, so a little bit rough to deal with there. And it kind of sucks that this hit affects Lair, I guess. But like, you don't really want to deal with Labyrinth, I don't think, with like effectively, like, I think 5 copies of Epidemic Virus, or 6 with a Trap Trick or whatever. Trap Trick. What is the name of this card? Trap Trick? Trap. Ah, yeah, Trap Trick. So, this would allow you to banish a copy of Epidemic Virus, of course, and then you can set one and then activate it same turn, which is pretty disgusting in its own way. As it just happens, though, right now in the meta, the current one, I guess, honestly, Eradicator Epidemic Virus is not that great. It's kind of just whatever. Well, not much you can do with this, surprisingly. The thing about this is, I can't think of any, like, spell-heavy decks currently. Like, even if you declared Eradicator right against, like, tier, they actually don't draw cards, I believe. They only add to their hand. And if you destroy, it counts as being sent to the graveyard with or by card effect, allowing them to trigger their, like, relatively obnoxious searches, like, for example, Tier Limit Scream, and then this would allow your opponent to, like, add Sleek or Prime or whatever. So, not the best. But it is completely interesting that you can tribute here with Lair of Darkness. So it's like a little contradictory. I don't know, like, all of the good tribute cards that exist, but with Lair of Darkness, it would be interesting in that, like, this tributes are counted as cost. So if you were to tribute, like, Kick Kalos, for example, Kick Kalos would not trigger, or, like, any tier monsters for that matter. They're sent to the graveyard by effect. Effect, I guess, would not trigger off of the effect of Lair of Darkness, which is interesting. But, like I said, as of currently, I don't really see, like, super good implementation of these cards, like, in general. Aside from, like, Epidemic Virus, these cards are pretty, like, coin flip, because you, like, even if we remove, like, Crush cards and Grin and Grave, which are effectively, like, the bad virus cards, we're left with Deck Devastation, Full Force, and Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Even if we're only looking at these ones, it's not like the best at all. Like, depending on what your opponent is playing, I guess, right? Sometimes these will just resolve and do nothing. Like, assuming your opponent isn't playing a deck like Tier, where if you declare right, you kind of suffer. Like, if you use Full Force Virus versus Deck Devastation, some decks have, like, different stat lines, and of course, they're not as affected, so let's take a look. So, Sword Soul, long one is 1200 attack. And then we have Taya, which is 1800. We have Moyu, which is 1700. And 1800 here. Which meets the conditions of none of the virus cards here, really. So, that kind of sucks for Full Force and Deck Devastation. So resolving this isn't really going to work that well. So if we instead go to, I guess, like, let's say Despia. Aluber has 0 defense. Despian Tragedy is 400. Dramaturge of Despia is 1500. Ad libitum of Despia is 1500 and 2000 defense here. And Fallen of Albaz, I guess. Might as well check Fallen of Albaz. Fallen of Albaz, and I guess Cartesia just gets blown out by both. Might as well check, I guess. Fallen of Albaz is 1800, 0. Meaning if we go ahead and use Full Force Virus, that will pop every single card in your opponent's hand, aside from, like, Ad Libitum. Like, pre-Bestials, I guess, that would be the case. Bestials aren't really within range to be popped, as it happens. That is every virus card, right? We aren't missing any. Are we? Yeah. So, this is pretty interesting. In that, electric virus here. Ah, I didn't even know this card existed. Huh. You can just take control of, like, a machine or a dragon. Is this useful? I mean, I doubt it, but whatever. For a rare card, this is actually pretty interesting. Huh. Has this card always been in the game? What? I mean, probably. Weird. Got a little distracted there. But I guess we'll end things off with talking about some fun interactions, I guess. Let's see. So, with Fallen of Albaz actually has something quite disgusting with it. So right now, since we're in, like, kind of a... Well, I mean... Yeah, I wouldn't say, like, a dragon meta, but if we were ever in a dragon meta, Fallen of Albaz is actually pretty disgusting. And I'll show you guys why in a second, so... We have Alba Lenitus, the Abyss Dragon. It cannot be used as fusion material, meaning you cannot super poly this away, which is interesting, I guess. And you can't, like, use this as material for Mirror Jade or whatever. So this must be either fusion summoned or special summoned by sending the above cards from any monster zones to the graveyard. Where have I seen that before? This card can attack monsters a number of times each battle phase up to the number of materials used for it. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add 1 polymerization normal spell or fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. So the important effect we're going to look at here is the must be either fusion summoned or special summoned by sending the above cards from any monster zones to the graveyard. And it says Fallen of Albaz +1 dragon monsters, meaning you're allowed to use as many dragon monsters as you want with Albalenitus here. How might that be useful? Well, before we get into that, we'll go over here and look at Cyber Dragons. Because Cyber Dragons have something similar with Chimera Tech Fortress Dragon. which is a rare. And of course, Cyber Dragon is also a rare, which makes this more humorous. Because technically, you can just, let's say you put in 3 copies of Cyber Dragon in your deck, and with Chimera Fortress Dragon, this must first be special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard, which is the same as Obelenitus. And it also says Cyber Dragon plus 1+ machine monsters, similar in how this one requires Fallen of Albaz. So the difference is that going second, you can just special summon Cyber Dragon from your hand to the field with like no issues whatsoever. And this also gets it's the original attack of Chimera Fortress Dragon is 1,000 times the number of materials used for its special summon, which is interesting, I guess. But anyway, with Cyber Dragon, there's one key difference between Cyber Dragon and Fallen of Albaz. Not so much Obelenitus and Chimera Fortress. The difference is that Cyber Dragon has to be special summoned, basically, because it is a 5-star monster. It is level 5, meaning it cannot be normal summoned. Why does this matter? Well, I'll explain it to you pretty simply. So, Cyber Dragon, because it is special summoned, it means it's face up, and it can be targeted by an assortment of cards. So real quick, I'll go over some cards for you. So, for example, Heavenly Sphere. We have Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres here. Once per opponent's turn, if this card is in the extra monster zone, quick effect, you contribute 1 monster from your hand or field, return 1 face-up card on the field to the hand. 1 face-up card? So, for example, if you were to special summon Cyber Dragon, anything that can target a face-up monster can be done onto Cyber Dragon, and that will stop the special summon of Chimera Fortress Dragon. Alright. So let's actually go look at some other things. For example, let's go with... what else do we have? Let's check, for example, Borlin Savage, Apollosa. Not like IP Masquerade, I guess. Would that work? Maybe. Maybe not. Let's check Underworld Goddess while we're here. So this only really allows you to target a face-up because you can't really negate set monsters. So let's see, Underworld Goddess, just monsters your opponent controls in general, right? And then let's check for like bestial stuff. Anything here? I mean, I guess these do something. They sure do. Branded Beast. This is just target 1 card your opponent controls. And then this is if your opponent normal or special summons a monster. Okay. So it kind of depends situationally, but if there is a card that needs to target a face-up, it does make the difference that you can set Fallen of Albaz. So if you didn't know, you're allowed to fusion summon with set monsters, which is why like a Book of Moon type effect is completely useless against like a fusion deck, one might argue, unless they have an ignition effect or something they want to use. Aside from that, yeah, pretty useless. Yeah, straight up. So you can actually, for example, I guess this is a little janky, but you can Magnamut add Fallen of Albaz. Then instead of going like normal summon Fallen of Albaz, of course, and then like discarding a card to attempt a fusion summon, and then your opponent being able to like maybe negate it or whatever. This is pretty disgusting. What you do is you inset Fallen of Albaz, and then you can just contact fuse away your opponent's entire deck. Or not deck, entire field. Well, of their dragon monsters specifically, but assuming they are playing Dragon Link, for example, this can be fairly devastating. Because this is like spell speed. Well, not spell speed. This is like it removes your opponent's like entire field as cost, which is pretty disgusting. Well, kinda, right? Which is basically the same as Cyber Dragon, I guess. But yeah, machine decks and dragon decks. I feel like they might never become meta because of like these two cards existing. So I'm just waiting for my aqua version of this, maybe. Then the only card I can't contact, views away, and send as cost would be like Kaleido Heart. Yep, we sure could use one of these. Something like this. And then it should probably be like a pretty mid monster, I would say. That would make me a happy boy, personally. Because Tearlaman is kind of like disgusting in the way that it plays. In the fact that they randomly have Crime and Salik just as cards that exist for tier. Really don't like these cards, yep. But Crime cannot respond to this, for example. Like, assuming for a second that Tearlaman monsters were dragons, if I set Fallen of Albaz, you wouldn't be able to target my Fallen of Albaz, of course, except with like maybe a Kaleido Heart. And then with your crime effects or whatever, you can't chain this because this does not start a chain. This is effectively an inherent summon that will wipe your board. So I guess a man can dream. Well, anyways, I guess I'll end the video here. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.